Yeah, and I'm just curious as to what is it about this event that that I'm going to talk about emotional intelligence, or that is of interest to you. So if it's okay if I just ask you so that I know how to answer a lot of the questions that are going to come up. Elton, what is it for you? Why are you here today? What is it that you're hoping to hear or learn or?
Yeah, I mean, I'm massively interested in the whole area of emotional intelligence from a business simulation perspective because one of the areas I'm going to be working with clients on is emotional intelligence, and there's an emotional intelligence focused simulation that
Okay.
Nullscape provide, and it's really, really good at getting people to challenge themselves in different workplace settings in the virtual simulated environment, try some different things out in terms of how they react to different situations, and
Oh,
then
I love it.
they get the kind of AI generated reports at the end, which tell them what their tendencies around emotional intelligence are in different situational things. So this is obviously, yeah, right up my street.
So I love what I'm hearing, and I think I've got a bit of controversial stuff about it, but it
Yeah,
will be
no, that's
really it will
fine.
be a really great conversation. How about
Yeah,
you,
and it's
Gemma?
it's
Yeah,
just a
sorry,
small caveat. I will have to. I'm expecting a knock at the door, but I'll only be gone for 5 minutes if that's the case.
it's no problem, no problem. Gemma, how about you? What brings you here?
Um, I don't know how I found it. I just popped up on my email, I think, or somewhere. I don't know where it was, but I'm a stakeholder manager for a team that's new, and working with a client that's challenging. And we're
You're
very
being very polite.
yeah, yeah. Both us and the client are in a storming phase of their team sort of formulation, and it's there's a the, there's a lot of people who aren't really listening to each other at the minute. So I'm just looking for as many tools in my toolbox as possible to help smooth the way through.
All right, and I would be happy to have a conversation afterwards just to give you some ideas of what to do,
Great.
because I do understand the complex of your situation. Um, and this is a 30-minute presentation, and I think it warrants a little bit more. So let's have a chat sometime soon. So my name is Vicky Ross. I've been in personal development training, oh, I don't know, from the day that I was born, probably. I was just one of those weird kids that didn't get interested in the boys and all of that, but was more interested about why things happen. I'm very, very curious, very curious. So when I was a teenager, I taught a lot of things to everybody. So if somebody wanted to know about geography, oh, I can teach you. Or my friends were going, oh, we've got the maths exam or the biology exam coming. I'm like, I'll teach you. So if I love something, I love teaching and talking about it. But it's my own personal story that brought me to do the things that I do. So when I was 22, a lot of things have happened before that. Moved a lot of countries. I've come from mixed parents, lived all over the place. So it did make me kind of look at things differently, because it was almost every time that we. Oh, sorry, I've just. Okay, because every time that we moved, it was almost like I had to learn a language, I had to learn a culture, and I learn a way of engaging with people. So at the time, I didn't pay any attention to it, but it was a great tool later on in my life. So at 22, I got married and I left South Africa. As you can hear, my accent is South African, but I'm actually half Greek and half Dutch. I'm not South African at all. Just learned English there. So I went to Australia with my husband, which turned out to be an absolute nightmare and a disaster. And I was all alone. I was very young, stupid, and so I crawled my way back to South Africa. But it did make me go, okay, hold on. This was such a big mess. Why did I make these decisions? What was it about me? What was it about me couldn't say no to my parents, to my father, couldn't say no to the prospect husband, all those kind of things. So that sent me down the rabbit hole of understanding self. And in the meantime, I'd got a job with South African Airways and I worked with them for 10 years. And while I was there, I actually became a trainer facilitator to teach customer service, personal, I used to do cabin crew evaluations, product development while I flew. So that's where I realized this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So I left South Africa because of all of the above reasons. My husband, we married, and within 6 weeks, he was hijacked twice, and I nearly lost him twice. So it was really, really horrible. And because we both got foreign passports, we just closed the door, sold the house, and left. We arrived here, started a family, and when my youngest was about 3, I said to my husband, I've got to do a bit more with my life because my brain just works too much. I just can't. I loved sitting at home drawing and chalk drawing and all of that kind of stuff with my kids, but I also wanted to just do the stuff that my brain was trained to do. So that's when I went and I studied NLP, having done a lot of stuff in South Africa with NLP, but just getting a formal qualification with NLP prac, master prac, train the trainer. And I did it with Paul McKenna, which I didn't know who he was because I didn't grow up in England. So I did it with Paul McKenna, and Paul on my master prac said to me, I've been watching you and you're really good. Are you a coach? And I said, yeah, I'm a coach. I'm a coach because I was stepping into my ID. And he said, I've been watching you. You're really great. I'd love for you to join the assisting team. So I just thought, oh, well, this is going to be a great way for me to do lots of pracs, master pracs. And he also trained with Richard Bandler, who was the NLP creator, co-creator. And again, I didn't know what I was stepping into because I didn't really know these people. I just knew the concepts of NLP. So I did work with them for about 8 years. And in that time, I did my coaching qualification, obviously my NLP. I learned to become instructor of hypnotherapy. I started doing freelance training. I created a coaching program for companies. And that's where all my training basically has come. And I've always been curious about what makes people work. So I've done a lot of team building. I've worked with a lot of directors of the NHS, only because somebody came to an NLP practitioner that I was giving, and he happened to be a divisional director of one of the big trusts. And from there, he brought me in and I did a lot of work with them, with their teams. And this is where I understood about team dynamics. And I've written the book, I Understand Me, because most people that I started working with don't understand themselves. They just know they have issues and they're not living the life that they want. So I would have to start like, okay, you're a human being, you breathe. These are the things that happen. Been very, very interested in neuroscience. I've been following Joe Dispenza and learning all his stuff about neuroscience as well. So I've been combining the NLP with the hypnotherapy, with the quantum physics, with the neuroscience, building it while working with teams, because I would see things and I'd go, that's not landing. Something else has got to work. That's not landing. What else is happening here? Go deeper, go deeper. I did some work with Thomas International back in 2010, where I learned the DISC, which is about the profiling, saw the flaws in it. This is also where I learned EQ. Again, saw the flaws in it as well, because everything is like a little box and this is the perfect box, and it isn't. Human beings are so complex and so dynamic that you have to open up your mind as to what else can be happening here in order to address it. So after I wrote my book of I Understand Me, I wrote the Why Teams Are Unproductive. And that came from working with teams and working with the managers and then working with their teams and listening to what the managers are saying and then listening to what the teams are saying. And it sounds like they're different companies. They're not even in the same building. So Gemma, when you said what you said, I'm like, oh yeah, I've been there. I've seen it. I've done it, and it's interesting. And it's only when you get a dynamic leader that then works with himself and then works with the team that starts to gel and work. And this is a lot of the work that I did in the NHS, which I loved. So yeah, my work has gone a lot ahead, and it opens up a lot more than the basics of what leadership is. So let me give you the presentation that I've prepared for you today, and we'll go from there. But just so, you have a bit of a background of who I am. Right, so I'm just going to put this back. I am guessing that you can see this. Oh.
Yeah.
All right, somebody else just entered the room. Right, so we're talking about emotional intelligence. It's a big thing in leadership as a strategic advantage. But why for me, in having been in this world and working with people and always thinking, what else can I bring into it, is why awareness, not answers, now defines leadership. So emotional intelligence is a great diagnostic tool, but for me, it's only the beginning. So it gives you the ability to recognize, to understand, and regulate your internal state so that you can respond rather than react. And this is what emotional intelligence is all about. It's all about that part of, I know who I am, why I'm feeling what I'm feeling, and therefore how do I regulate that. I'll tell you now what the problem with that is, because the big word here is the regulate your internal state. So ideally, if you know that certain things trigger you and therefore you have certain emotions, you can then work with them or suppress them or put them aside because this is not the right place, blah, blah, blah. And that's what emotional intelligence covers. However, emotional intelligence plateaus because it's a great diagnostic tool, doesn't teach you about why you feel that way. So it's very good to say that you have these dominant emotional traits and these are your triggers. So it gives you the diagnosis, but it doesn't explain to you, well, why do you get angry when you drive? Or why do you shout if somebody questions you? Or why do you feel like you lose your confidence if somebody asks you a question and you don't, what is happening inside of you? So it gives you a bit of skill without self-possession because you don't understand what's actually going on at a deeper level. So the question that I would always ask is, what has to be true for this person in this situation to behave this way? Because I do believe ultimately people have got the ability to be anything and everything. So when somebody's behaving in a certain way at a certain time, I need to understand what has to be true for that to be happening. So this is where it goes a lot deeper for me. So why leadership still feels so hard is because awareness collapses under pressure. And this is something that most people do not kind of understand. And when I discuss it with leaders and then with their teams, they kind of go, oh gosh, yeah, it caught me unaware. Or this happened and I wasn't prepared and I just flew off the handle, or I, wanted to defend myself, or I wanted to justify myself. I needed to explain the reasons. I felt attacked, all these things. So a lot of people under pressure lose that awareness because we are being attacked. And when we are being attacked, the stress hormones in our bodies go sky high. So if you look at it from a brainwave kind of place, we go to high beta, and high beta is a survival mode. So when we enter the brainwaves, enter survival mode, it doesn't matter what logic we've got around us. What really is going on is your brain is going, I'm under attack and I need to survive. So therefore, all your focus narrows down and you're looking through a very small lens to see where the danger is coming and how do I protect myself. So therefore, the logical sense of like, oh, what could this be? And how should I be answering? And what is the best way for that isn't an important aspect as far as the body and the neurology is concerned. What is important is that I don't die. So therefore, it changes the way that we see things. It changes the way that we react. All our energy goes away from the center of our bodies and it goes into our arms and our legs in case we have to fight or flight. Thinking stops because thinking takes too much energy and we're just ready to fight the day. So it's interesting that if we just learn on a surface level who I am, as in this is how I react, when the pressure hits and we get attacked, all that goes out the window, which is why, or this is where, for me, emotional intelligence, I don't know if to say the word fails is the right word, but it fails in the sense that it doesn't give you enough tools. So leadership doesn't fail at a skill, it fails at identity. So when I work with people is that I work on the identity level as to how did you be the person that you are? What has to be true? So I work a lot with business owners, and it's interesting when they work with even their kids, their families, their partners. the identity level, because it will show everywhere. The way that they lead in their business, in their division, wherever it is also the way that they will lead at home. So people don't know what triggers them, or they might know what triggers them, like when this person challenges me or when this person does this, I get triggered, but they don't know why. They don't know what is the thing that lies underneath that has created my identity. So what they do a lot of the time, people mask how they feel as they have a role to play. You know, I'm a manager, or I'm a team leader, or I'm a team leader, or whatever they are. And I cannot be seen to be weak, and I cannot be seen. So we mask a lot. Now, I do totally accept and understand that in a business environment, it may not be appropriate for you to have a complete meltdown. It can happen, but it's not appropriate. Get that, because that's not professional, it's not a business, and especially if you're a high leader. Having said that, if you are masking, you'll eventually have a meltdown anyway, because the masking is such an emotional suppression that eventually there'll be an explosion anyway. So what we've noticed, and we can see this very, very clearly if you look at autistic people. So autistic people learn to mask because they don't know themselves fully and they want to be accepted. So they will always mask and take roles of who they should be and how they should be. But eventually they have complete breakdowns, and usually those breakdowns happen with autistic kids and autistic teenagers when they come home and they feel safe at home and they feel that whatever I am, I'm going to be accepted, and that's where they have the meltdown at home. So when I've worked with parents with autistic kids, I will often hear how they have complete mental breakdowns at home, screaming, shouting, carrying on. So in some ways, although a lot of these leaders may not be autistic, the masking still does the same thing, because it's still a suppression mechanism. So people tend to lose themselves in what what is expected of them. So in some ways, we can say that people abdicate their personalities, their identities, because they're stepping into a role, and then they have this idea of who they should be, how they should be behaving, and because they need the role, want the role, it's a way of feeling accepted, and all those kind of things, that they will adapt themselves and abdicate their true inside, what's going on. So I do what I call an identity liberation. This is where I work very deeply with anybody, so yes, I do a lot of leadership because I love working with managers and their teams. I also feel that people, you spend 2/3 of our lives at work. It needs to be good. It needs to be fulfilling. It needs to be something that gives you joy rather than gives you stress. So the ability to lead without being run by the inherited patterns, the emotional conditioning, or the unconscious roles is where we are trying, or what we are striving to do. So the big question is how do I become who I am, and therefore I lead the way I do? So again, what most people where I wrote the book of I Understand Me, what most people don't know is, how did I become this personality? Because this personality that I am right now creates the behavior that creates my personal reality. So if where I am, if the team is not working, there's something inherently dysfunctional in the whole team, and usually it starts with the head. And the way that the head is leading the team, but it will it will show all the problems with every kind of problem. So in Greek we say gnosis eαυτόν, which means know who you are, the big famous Socrates kind of thing, know thyself, which comes from Socrates. So from managing yourself, because this is what emotional intelligence does, it will help you manage yourself, but it doesn't help you lead yourself. Because when you manage, so the way I explain about management, imagine there's a house, right? And on the roof there's a hole, and it starts to rain. Very soon that water comes in, it damages the ceiling, and now I have a drip. When I'm managing that problem, it's like getting a bucket and putting the bucket under the drip and actually letting the water sort of fall in. If I know how much rain we've got and how strong the rain is, I can almost predict that every, say, 2 hours I need to empty the bucket. I'll have to put a towel, clean up a little bit of that mess and put the bucket back there again. So while I'm there constantly watching the bucket, I won't have a flood in my room. So that is managing. But the minute I leave the house because I need to go to the shops, or I need to run an errand, or I need to go and visit somebody, nobody's watching the bucket. And next thing I come home and my whole floor of my room is flooded. So managing can keep it at bay. And this is what I see with a lot of people that learn about the basics of emotional intelligence and all that, about how do I manage myself. As long as there's no storms, as long as we don't, turn our heads the other way, we can manage our emotions. We can pretend to be somebody that's in control or confident or whatever. But inside is constant management. And again, that suppression is building up. But when you lead from yourself, you're no longer managing, you're actually fixing the roof, you're fixing the hole. So then it can rain, the storms of life can come through, and we will be okay because we can manage ourselves. So what part of you, this is the big question that I always say, what part of you are you abdicating? What part are you hiding, which when you get triggered cannot stay hidden? It's that explosion that you're waiting, and I see it. I'll never forget. When I always have like a very open, general, casual conversation with the leaders that I'm going to work with, and the one said to me, "What I'd like you to do in the next 6 months is completely change who I am. I don't want to change the way I lead. I want to change this. I want to change that." She had this sort of idea, this fantasy of what a good leader would be, and I listened to her and I said, and for the purpose of what? So she had some dreams of where she wanted to, what she wanted to achieve in her career and all of that. And in her mind, is she had to change all of these elements of herself. And I looked at her and I said, well, I'm not going to do that. And she went, what do you mean? I'm your client. And I said, yeah, you're my client. And I want to get the best out of you. I want you to achieve your dreams, but I don't want you to change who you are. If anything, I want you to let who you are come out fearless, unapologetic, and achieve these dreams. So that's what I'm going to do with you if you carry on working with me. And she looked at me and she went, well, I've got nothing to lose. And I remember how she thanked me when we ended. But she said, you really helped me embrace myself, love myself, accept myself, and really stand strong and confident with who I am, and then lead. I said, because you've got to take into account you've reached this far in your career because somebody recognizes the skills that you have, the talents that you've got, the personality. People are not stupid. You didn't get this far because you were able to kid everybody into an idea of yourself. I said, but it's you that is not embracing who you are, and you're constantly abdicating yourself, trying to be something different, which is not working. Because in the end, you're the one that's not happy. And she just looked at me and she goes, how can you say all of that in just a half an hour conversation? And it's because this is what I do. This is my stuff, So with identity liberation, I always look at the role that we are. So for instance, women and men, both of us, when we become parents, there's a part of us that abdicates the free part of who we were, because now we have to adapt a new role, the role of the father, the role of the mother. And most people get lost inside that role and lose themselves. And it's interesting, you can see this, that when the last child leaves the house, a lot of couples divorce, because what was keeping them together was that whole responsibility of the role that they had, that they were parents, and therefore as parents they had to do X, Y, Z. But when that role finished, they had lost themselves so much that they didn't know how to connect back to who they were. So the whole idea of everything that we do is to understand the role without losing yourself. So understand the identity this role gives you without losing your own core identity. Because from the identity, you will behave. I mean, people walk into a room. It's always so interesting when we do this. And just by watching how somebody is walking, you can tell how confident they feel, how they feel in that moment, which is a state. how you're feeling. That state creates a behavior, which is why if you're watching that behavior with a curious mind and you know what you're looking for, you can actually see the state by watching the response, which is the behavior, and that gives the outcome. In a very simple term, I always say your thoughts create your feelings, and your feelings create your actions give you a result. The problem that most of us do is that we look at results and we say this result is not good. In other words, it could be miscommunication in a team. That's the result, is that everybody got it wrong. So that's the result. So then we go back to the action and we say, what was the action that created the result? And people will go, well, you know, he said and then she said, but I didn't say that. And then the fight starts in the action. At some point, people say, all right, we're going to change this action. But nobody thinks about changing the feeling. And then nobody goes, well, in order to feel this way, what was my thinking? And the thinking comes from the identity. Because it's only when you can change the identity that changes the feeling, which will change the action, and it will give a different results. So it's interesting again how people will always focus around the actions and the results rather than the thinking and the feeling, which is about your identity and the state that you are. So a lot of the things that I do when I speak with teams, when I speak with managers, is about the identity liberations. Pressure doesn't test capability, by the way. It exposes conditioning. So again, it's only when somebody's really under pressure can we actually see where the flaws of the identity are, where the weaknesses are, where's the cracks in all of that, and then what does that mean, and what has to be true for them to behave this way, and therefore what is it that we need to evolve and change. So again, a lot of people, when I talk about change and personality change, they will be going, but if I'm not this, then who am I? I don't know who I am. And it's always so interesting that is like, I don't like what I've got, but I know how to survive it. So therefore I'll just keep doing this because I don't know what else. I find it because I run retreats and I get people down to the beach at 6 o'clock or whenever the sun rises. We do meditations, we do declarations to the universe, and I will work with a person every single day. And when I say to them, tell the universe who you are, what you want, what you're grateful for, and I'm gobsmacked time and time again. I expect it now, but I'm gobsmacked when people go, I don't know. I don't know what I want. I know what I don't want. A lot of people know what they don't want. And again, a lot of it has to do with our collective consciousness at the moment. Well, I think it's happening all the time, where there is so much negativity. The economy's bad, and you know, Trump is doing this, and the Ukraine's doing that, and then there's Gaza, and then there's the taxes and Keir Starmer, blah, and there's just so much negativity. We become very quickly conditioned to know what we don't want, but we are not being taught to think about what we do want and how we become the person that is the personality that creates that reality. So the pressure doesn't test capability, but it exposes conditioning. So leadership begins with identity. And again, that leadership could be leadership in a home, leadership in a small business, leadership in a solopreneur. It could be leadership in a big organization. So emotional intelligence will open the door, will expose some things. Is the diagnostic tool I was talking about. It brings awareness to restore authorship. And again, a lot of people are going, well, what is authorship? So authorship, in a very plain terms, is who has the right to write this book. So for instance, there's been questioning about Shakespeare's authorship because they said he was an uneducated man. How did he know so much to write so many plays? Was it really Shakespeare that wrote the plays, or maybe was it a pseudonym, or was it somebody else that wrote, you know, all that kind of stuff? So when we're talking about restoring our own authorship, is to know like who we are and what we are about and what do we stand for and what are our values and beliefs. What are the paradigms that we've been living? Are we going to carry on? Are we going to change them? You know, people think that our personalities are, you know, written in stone and can't change. We have the choice to change in a heartbeat. So identity liberation is the work that you do, because it is about liberating the parts of you that are just not giving you the outcomes that you want now, and also being respectful to the part of you that created this part of your identity, because it was necessary back when you were 7 or 5 or whatever age you were. You needed that to survive, but you don't need it now. But for some reason, we're not taught to look at ourselves and go, oh, I can do some spring cleaning and I can get rid of some parts of me that just don't give me the outcomes that I want. And yes, it could be that simple in the way that we look at it. So teams don't follow strategies, they follow states. One of the things that people don't know is that stress is highly contagious, because stress is a chemical and therefore it exudes pheromones. So when a leader is stressed, like it or not, if the team is unconscious, and in my experience, most people, never mind most teams, people live unconscious and reactive lives. Therefore, they are aware that they're stressed, but they're not aware that they are absorbing it, and they're making a choice and a decision inside to go, I will not let this affect me. So therefore it affects them. So a nervous system will synchronize, clarity spreads faster than control. So when we are clear, that will go a lot quicker than trying to control ourselves. And authority is felt, it's not announced. People do not have to tell you how great they are. You will know that they're great by just talking to them and being with them and feeling their energy without even realizing it. You just have a sense. And I'm sure you've all had the experience of, somebody that you meet and you just know who they are and how they, what they are all about. So the big question that changes leadership is, who am I being right now? Another question that comes with that is what I'm doing, and what I'm doing could be the way I'm communicating, the way I'm behaving, the way I'm making decisions, the way I'm reprimanding, the way I'm leading, whatever, is what I'm doing giving me the outcome that I want? So I'm not one, and I teach this to all my clients, to, oh, this is right and this is wrong, this is good and this is bad, because I don't believe there's any of that. The only thing that is relevant is what I'm doing, which comes from who I'm being, giving me the outcome that I want. And then take that responsibility to create change. So this is the end of this particular presentation, and I'm just going to open it up for a bit of a discussion and a Q&A. Hi, Kathrika. We didn't meet when we first started, but I hope you all enjoyed it. So, Elton, questions, or what is the thing that you've taken away? It's a huge topic, as you can well appreciate.
Observations. It got me thinking around a lot of different areas. I'm currently writing a blog which is around the intersect between sports leadership and leadership that we might see in a more traditional workplace, and I'm doing it through the lens of Sir Alex Ferguson. And the reason why I say that is because what you've just talked about here completely resonates with me, whereby you had a team of people who were winners. You take that leader out, who's got very high emotional intelligence, replace him with another leader that hasn't, by his own admission. And then what happened as a direct result of that is that you've got a team of people with exactly the same skills, exactly the same people, going in the following day to work and not achieving hardly anything for years. And that is purely down to that leadership and some of the things you touched on there. And it never actually came back after that point.
I've seen that so many times. I've seen that when the leader changes, the whole team changes. And I always, when I talk with leaders, I say, imagine that you're in the center and this is your business, and each part of your team member is a business owner. Right. So part of your job as a leader is you grow people. Because I've had it when I go and teach leadership and people go, why am I going to be responsible? I'm not a psychologist. I'm not, the moaning that I get from leaders, it's actually quite, when they are together, but they haven't got their team members, it's quite unbelievable. And then I say, fair enough. You're not a psychologist. And this is why you need a coach, but your team needs a coach too. So that's the one thing. I said, but you are growing people. So if you don't want to do that, don't take the role. Because leaders, I said, do you honest to God believe that your team members, they get up in the morning and they have a cup of coffee and they're getting dressed and they're brushing their teeth. And while they're doing all of that, they're going, I wonder how I can piss Elton off today. What can I do that will really make Elton scream? And they all burst out laughing and they go, well, it feels like that. I said, it's not. I said, every single one of those people are people. They're proud. They want to achieve something. They want to grow. They want to support their families. They want to have a fantastic life and go on holiday. They want to buy a nice shirt. I said, they are not coming to work to piss you off. So if they are not behaving well, you need to ask yourself, what are you doing?
Yeah, you know? It's really true. Yeah.
And I do appreciate that some people have problems and they come to work and, you know, I had a manager and the leader I was working with, they were going, I don't know what's going on with this woman, but she's not telling us. But her performance has fallen. She's not engaging, blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. So I said, what do you want to do? They said, well, if she goes to occupational therapy, we're talking 6 months off. And I said, do you know the cost of that? And they're going, no. And I said, so work it out. Work out how long that you're going to pay her to stay at home. You have to bring an interim manager you're going to pay more for them. There's going to be a down productivity because of people getting to know the manager getting to know them and getting to know the system. You know, it's going to block. And then they're going to leave and the other manager is going to come back and productivity is going to drop again. So what's the cost of that? You have to work out what's going on with this person. So they said, can you do it? And she was having major problems with her child. Her child was just kicking off left, right, and center, suicidal, all sorts of things. And she was highly stressed. But I fixed her. I didn't fix her. I showed her how to see herself and to see her role and to see how she can support her child. And it was night and day within 3-4 weeks. You know, so it's always interesting how, and I love it when I'm working with a manager that sees that in their team and going, oh, they're just you know, not being productive. They're just instead of going, there's something wrong here. We need to help them and support them. So that's what we did here. So yeah, you know, you're growing teams. The other thing that I always say to managers, if this was a business owner, and you've now contracted them to come and paint your lounge, would it be acceptable for you to go, all right, go and pay the lounge, I'm going to pay you, you know, paint the lounge, I'm going to pay you your 10,000 that you've asked, and then your contractor comes, what brush should I use? I've got 2 brushes here, which one should I use? And you go, use this one. Okay. Do I use this paint or should I use this paint? Should I start this wall? Should I start in this corner? Do you know, would that be acceptable? So if you've hired somebody that needs that level of support, you've hired wrong for the role that you want. You getting pissed off with that person is your problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah.
You know, so this is where we go into the world of profiling your team members, because they can have experience and they can have the references that you want, but they don't have the personality for your team, for your job, for your role. And if you hire them wrong, it's your fault. And unfortunately, you're then, they're not doing their stuff. They feel it. And the more that they feel that level of disapproval, the less productive they can be. You know, I've seen this so many times where people become paralyzed. They can't work, they can't think because they're in survival mode. They're so, you know, so it's not enough to go, oh, they're being triggered. Oh, this. You have to understand what's going on inside the brain and how the brain affects the body, how it affects the thinking, the breathing. So it's complex when we look at it. This is why 30 minutes.
Yeah, and it's definitely the neuroscientific approach that I see all the time when we do business simulation training with leadership teams, and they get a chance to run the business, say, for 6 months and then pause and reflect on what just happened. They never get to do that in reality, and they don't necessarily understand the impact of their decisions on other departments, but that all comes to fruition within the business simulated environment, so they get a lot that they can take away and work on, which is good. So yeah, definitely resonated with me and it was really good.
Excellent. Gemma, your turn. So I hope you heard some things that gave you ideas for the teams that you're working with. And
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm actually signed up to do an NLP practitioner course in April, May.
excellent.
So yeah, increasing my skills that way as well. I think the issue for my team is we've got a lot of passionate people, really
Hmm.
passionate people who are good at what they do, but no one's talking to each other. So you have a lot of people going off, all striving for the same goal, but in different directions. And then people are going, well, why have they done that? Well, I'm supposed to do that. What, they're doing it wrong. That's not how they're supposed to, this is how I do it. So it's kind of at the minute, my challenge is how do we get better? How do we communicate better as a team?
So who's the leader there?
Well, that's another thing as well. So there's been quite a lot of upheaval in the team. So I'm one of the senior leaders in this team. I was off last year for or not present as much, partly with an operation, partly through grief and all that kind of stuff. So I had a very difficult year last year. My line manager, who's the main manager of the team, the director, has been off for the last sort of 2 to 3 months with pretty much with exhaustion and then
Yeah, burnout.
pneumonia. Yeah, so there has been challenges around that as well. And as I said, client is difficult, so we're kind of almost firefighting that. And whilst we're firefighting that, the team has sort of done that.
Yeah, of course, because everybody's trying to survive here. And
Yeah.
and this is what I was also talking about earlier, that when somebody goes off, which is fair enough, but
Mm.
you can see the disruption and the lack of productivity. It's mayhem. And it's a hell of a cost to everything. So I'm curious as to why. I appreciate that your director, first of all, if your director's getting burnt out, they're not getting supported themselves, or they're
Yeah.
not getting properly supported, because a director shouldn't get burnt out.
Mm.
And a director should have,
It's
sorry, yeah.
it's a mixture of two things. So the support is there, but they're also quite into too much into the detail themselves. So um,
But I would, as a coach to somebody like that, I would pick that up and I would be going, what are you doing?
yeah.
I'm very good at being very straightforward with. I'm nice. I'm very nice, but I don't bullshit. I don't take prisoners. So I do it because I really care about the people. And I will say to somebody, why are you doing that? I had a conversation with a director, manager, a marketing director of a big company, big company. And I came in there and I said, so how are you doing and what's happening? She goes, oh my God, I'm so stressed. So I said, well, what's happening? She says to me, we had this event that we were planning, and I had to spend 3 hours sourcing balloons. It was so stressful. And I went, what? Sourcing balloons? Marketing director. I said, do me a favor. I said, I don't need to know, but I want you to think about your salary and think about how much do you get paid per month. Then I want you to go divide that by, say, 4. Let's just do a give or take, so 4 weeks, to a day, to an hour, and then times that by 3 and tell me, can you justify your company paying you to source balloons? And she just looked at me. She goes, I've never thought about it before. I thought I was doing my team a favor. I said, if your team needs help to source balloons, you're not managing them well.
Mm.
And she was like,
Maybe if it was hot air balloons,
sorry?
might be if it was hot air balloons, might be a bit
No,
different.
they were
The
just balloons.
responsibility,
Just balloons.
just
And she did the whole of needing to justify herself. And then when she ended, I said, you can be justified, you can be right. It's still not the right thing. I understand that, oh, your team this. So she then I went on holiday to Greece, and she phones me up and she goes, this team member that I've had a problem with, and she's been carrying the team member and hating him. So he feels the hate, by the way, every day. She says, I've got to fire him. He's got to go. And I said to her, did you hire wrong? And she looked at me, well, we were on the phone, and she said, yes, I hired wrong. I said, well, then it's your fault, and you can't just fire him because that's not fair. So she goes, what do I do? Because I said, what do you want? She goes, I want him to leave. I don't want to have to go through arbitration and HR. I just want him to go. So I said, okay, this is how you have the conversation. So I taught her how to have the conversation. I'm super good with language, by the way, because language to me, every word, there's a deeper meaning of where it's coming from. So I taught her how to have the conversation, and I said, go and have this conversation with him. And part of the conversation would lead him for her to say, so what do you want to do? Like he will say certain things, and then she must go, oh, oh, oh. Obviously, I'm exaggerating, but oh, I didn't realize. Oh, okay. Oh, all right. So what do you want then? So then he would at this point say, I want to leave. And you must then go, oh, okay. I can do that. I can help you. I can help you with that. I said, give him garden leave, give him some extra money because it's your fault that he's sitting in this situation. Support him, help him get another job somewhere else, maybe give him a good reference and let him go. And she phoned me up 2 days later to go, oh my God, you're a witch. And I said, why am I a witch? She says, I did exactly what you said. And it came to the point where he says, I would like to leave. And I supported him and I left him. And I said, how do you feel now? She goes, I actually feel amazing. Because she had this whole stress and he's so horrible and how am I going to get him out of here? And actually the whole transition went so beautifully and he was like so touched and that she was so understanding and so kind. And she was worried that it's a small industry. It's a big company, but it's a small industry. And she was worried that if she fired him, she was going to be known as the bitch of all of this. And she didn't want that. So it's always interesting. It comes back down to the leadership, Gemma. It comes back down to how are they being supported? And it could be that, yes, they micromanage. What has to be true for this person to feel the need to micromanage this much? It means that they feel they don't have control. And if I don't micromanage, somebody's going to do me in. There's something around that. So that's why I'm saying that when we do identity liberation, we have to get to the core of why people do and lead and behave the way they do. Because if we can't fix that, then we can't help them. It's not enough for me as a coach to go to somebody and go, well, you should stop micromanaging. You're a leader. They're not going to stop because they don't even know why they micromanage. It's just who they are. It's part of their identity. So how do I change the identity? It's who I am. What do you mean? But it's also interesting because, again, when I teach people to see themselves, when I see people do these kind of things, then I help them understand themselves and say, as a result, this is how you speak. But when you're speaking to somebody who's a big picture, they hate the level of details that you give them. They can't listen to you. And they block off and they're like, there we are. Size of the nuts. We don't need to know how many nuts and what size they need to be. We need to just know that the cars run. Do you know? So it's a interesting dynamic when we get to know people and what is not working.
Yeah, it's always really powerful as well in terms of something we always say when we start a facilitated simulation session is the only way to get people to believe in an idea is to get them to believe it was their idea in the first place. So when they go through the whole process and the learning journey throughout the day, quite often at the end, they'll say, thanks for helping us realise this and bringing it. I said, I didn't do anything. You did all this on your own. You came up with the ideas and solved them in the simulated environment. Now you can try and replicate that in the non-simulated environment. I didn't tell you how to do anything. You just went out there and figured it out for yourself. And that then becomes something that they can take a bit more ownership of because they feel that they've come up with those ideas themselves rather than being told to do something in a prescriptive way.
So it's a thing that I love in my Big Fat Greek Wedding movie where they're saying, well, is dad the head of the family? No, dad is the head of the family, but the mother's the neck and she makes the head turn in the direction that she wants, or something like that. Yeah. I would love to have more conversations with you. Fari, can you maybe give the Elton and Gemma a link? What is your biggest takeaway, by the way? Your biggest takeaway of today?
I think for me, it's the identity piece. It's the we don't do things behavior, and I think this is why I'm doing NLP. because everything stems from who we believe we are, and all our behaviours stem from that. And I think that's been huge for me today, just that kind of focus, really.
Reminder.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of people do the obvious stuff, like they look at what the trauma is or what the belief systems are, and then they fix that and things are still not working because people don't understand that there's also paradigms. And paradigms are very unconscious programs of, and this is what the P in NLP is, and even there, on a practitioner, they just touch onto it. But it's a program. How do I know to do this? And that's
Yeah.
because I'll observe it. So paradigm is a Greek word from paradigma, which means example. So if you are 2 years old and your parents are having a squabble fight, your learning about how to relate with somebody is to squabble.
Mm.
So you can have the best partner later on, it doesn't feel right because your example, your imprint is a squabble situation. So if you've got somebody that you squabble with, you'll hate it, but you know how to survive because that's what you've been taught. So until you become very aware of it and then start to consciously change it, mechanically change it, and do the rewiring in your neural pathways, and this is where the neuroscience comes in.
Yeah.
Getting to know it consciously, oh, I don't like this, I need to change that, doesn't change it. I've seen it too long. I've seen it, I've experienced it. I've worked with people and going, why are they still not changing? They know. And you know, it's something that I heard somewhere that in a habit is something that's very unconscious and you do it repetitively. So you don't have to think about it, you just automatically do it. And emotions are habits as well. And they are addictions. But once we become aware of them, they're no longer habits, they're now choices. And people still choose that because there's addictions and there's like, I don't know what else to do.
Yeah.
I don't know how to be in a loving relationship. I don't know how to not be controlling. My world, you know, if you got to look at the trauma, and you know, we think, well, if they haven't been burnt by cigarettes or starved or stuck in a cupboard, well, that's not really trauma, it's just life. But it does cause trauma to kids, and we become who we are out of that, and that reflects on our leadership and our relationships and all of that. So thank you for that, Gemma. Elton,
And
what's
for
your
me,
biggest?
definitely the narrow lens through which you reactively make decisions when you're put under pressure. That was the thing, because then you've only got one part of your brain which goes into the fight mode, and therefore you're looking at the things that are coming towards you, and looking at different ways of batting them away.
Yeah.
And then in that case, you're not using that rational thought. And as I say, when I played the emotional intelligence sim, that's exactly what I was doing. I was put back into scenarios which I hadn't been in for a while, but I could see the instant impact of what I was
Yeah.
doing as well, in terms of that team member being, demotivated, wanting to leave, or whatever it was, based on the actions that I'd taken that I thought were quite reasonable.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it definitely, I was doing that, which is what you talked about, which is a narrow
Yeah.
part of the brain. So yeah, really good.
Fantastic. Well, I would love to have another conversation with you at some point. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, stay in touch. Really appreciate that.
it was lovely to meet you and to hear your comments and all that. And we'll chat soon.
Yeah, we will. Thanks very much, Vicky.
You take care.
Cheers, Kofu.
Bye.
See you later. Bye.